When I got back from the business trip, I found a family album where I had been cut out and it was written, "Worst Grandma in the World." I gave my daughter-in-law an envelope that left everyone speechless. The taxi stopped in front of the red brick house in the Boston suburbs. I paid the fare and adjusted my blazer before grabbing my suitcase. The education conference in Chicago had been exhausting but rewarding. After 40 years teaching English literature, the Academic Excellence Award was the recognition that validated all the sacrifices I had made. The driver helped me take the suitcase out of the trunk. "Have a good day, Professor," he said. "Thank you," I replied, observing my son's house. The lights were on, curtains open. It was Sunday afternoon, and I had told Michael I would visit the grandchildren after the conference. I walked to the door, feeling a mixture of tiredness and excitement. I wanted to tell Emma and Liam about the award. At 10 and 8 years old, they might not fully understand its significance, but I wanted them to know their grandmother had accomplished something important. I rang the doorbell. The sound of hurried footsteps was followed by the door opening. "Grandma!" Emma shouted, throwing her arms around me. Her brown hair was tied in a messy braid, and she wore a blue dress that I had sent as a Christmas gift. "Hello, my love," I said, bending down to hug her properly, ignoring the pain in my knee that always bothered me after long trips. "Mom, Grandma is here," she yelled over her shoulder. Michael appeared in the hallway, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt. "Hi, Mom," he said, leaning in for a quick hug. "How was the conference?" "It was wonderful," I began, but was interrupted when Liam came running down the stairs. "Grandma!" he exclaimed, hugging my legs. "My boy," I smiled, placing my hand on his hair. "How you've grown." "Kids, let your grandmother come in properly," a voice said from the kitchen. Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, appeared drying her hands on a dish towel. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did when it came to me. "Hello, Rebecca," I said politely. "I hope I'm not disrupting dinner." "Not at all," she replied, her tone contradicting her words. "We're preparing a roast. You can stay if you'd like." The reluctant invitation was typical. In the 11 years since Rebecca entered Michael's life, our relationship had never been warm. At first, I attributed it to the fact that she had lost her own mother at a young age. I thought perhaps she saw me as a threat to her maternal authority. After so many years, I knew better. The problem wasn't what I did or didn't do, it was who I was. A woman who had built a career, who continued working even after 60, who believed that women had more to offer the world than just being mothers and wives. "I'd love to stay for dinner," I replied, despite the tense atmosphere. I didn't visit because of Rebecca. I visited for my grandchildren. Michael took my suitcase. "I'll put this in the guest room. How long are you staying?" "Just until tomorrow." "I have classes to prepare on Tuesday." I noticed his eyes avoided mine. There was something strange in the air, more than the usual tension with Rebecca. "Grandma, come see my new science project." Liam pulled my hand, leading me to the living room. I followed him, but something on the coffee table caught my attention. A large photo album, bound in brown leather, with the inscription, "Our Family," in golden letters. "What's this?" I asked, picking up the book. "Oh, it's the new album Mom made," Emma explained. "She said it was important to keep our family memories." Something in the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I opened the album and flipped through the first pages. Photos of Michael and Rebecca at their wedding, images of Emma and Liam's, births, birthdays, family vacations. Then I noticed a pattern. In group photos where I should have been, there were empty spaces, pictures cut out or manipulated to eliminate my presence. A photo from Emma's 6th birthday had an empty space next to Michael. I clearly remembered that day. I had brought a chocolate cake that I made especially for her. My heart raced. I turned more pages. Christmas, Thanksgiving, school graduations. At each family event, any trace of my presence had been erased. On the last page of the album, in elegant black calligraphy, there was a phrase that made my blood freeze. "The worst grandmother in the world doesn't deserve a place in our memories." I looked up, stunned, to find Rebecca standing in the doorway, watching my reaction with a slight smile on her lips. Our gazes met, hers cold and defiant, mine hurt and incredulous. "Children," said Rebecca without breaking eye contact with me, "go wash your hands for dinner." When the children's footsteps disappeared upstairs, I placed the album back on the table. "Why?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "Don't play the victim, Eleanor," she replied, crossing her arms. "You know very well why. A real grandmother would be present. A real grandmother would choose family over career. I don't want my children growing up believing that your selfish behavior is normal." "You have no right," I began, but was interrupted by Michael's return. He looked from me to the album, and his face paled. "Mom, I can explain." "You knew about this?" I asked, the betrayal in his voice cutting me deeper than Rebecca's actions. "It wasn't his idea," Rebecca quickly intervened. "It was mine, but he agreed that the children need positive examples in their lives. Examples of people who really put family first." I looked at my son, the boy I raised alone after his father left, the boy for whom I worked 2 jobs to provide a college education, the boy who was now a man who allowed his wife to erase his mother from family history. "Michael," my voice faltered. He stared at the floor. "It's complicated, Mom." In that moment, something broke inside me, but also something strengthened. I looked at the album, at Rebecca, at Michael, and made a decision. This would not stand. "All right," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "You want to erase me? Let's see if you can erase everything I really am." I grabbed my purse and went upstairs to see my grandchildren before dinner. As I hugged Emma and listened to Liam talk about his project, my mind was working. That album was just the tip of the iceberg, I knew. It was the physical manifestation of something Rebecca had been doing for years, trying to exclude me from my grandchildren's lives. Well, 2 could play this game. And I had just won an award for academic excellence. If there was anything I was good at, it was researching, documenting, and presenting evidence. I sat at the dinner table that night with a serene smile on my face, while internally beginning to plan the contents of an envelope that would change everything. That night, after the uncomfortable dinner where Rebecca dominated the conversation and Michael barely met my eyes, I lay awake in the guest bedroom. The ceiling fan rotated slowly. Above me, its gentle whirring unable to drown out my thoughts. My mind wandered back to a time when it was just Michael and me against the world. I was 32 when David left. Michael was only 7, a quiet boy with his father's eyes and my stubborn determination. I still remember the morning I found the note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. Don't try to find me." No goodbye, no explanation, just cowardly words on a piece of paper. The rent was due in 2 weeks. I had been working part-time at the community college while finishing my doctorate. Suddenly, I was a single mother with bills piling up and a confused little boy asking where his daddy went. "He had to go away for work," I told Michael that first night, swallowing my tears as I tucked him into bed. I wouldn't let him see me break. The next morning, I called Professor Jenkins at the university. "I'll take that full-time position," I said, abandoning my plans for a more flexible schedule. "And if there are any evening classes available, I'd like those too." For 5 years, my life became a blur of lecture halls, grading papers laid into the night, and rushing to pick up Michael from after-school programs. I remember his school plays, perched in the back row in my teaching clothes, sometimes arriving just as the curtain rose because I couldn't get away from office hours any earlier. One winter evening, when Michael was 12, I found him sitting, alone at the kitchen table, struggling with math homework. "Why don't you ask your friends for help?" I suggested, dropping my heavy bag of ungraded essays on the counter. "What friends?" he replied, not looking up. That night, I cried in the shower, where he couldn't hear me. The water masked my sobs as I confronted the cost of my choices. Michael was growing up lonely while I worked to keep a roof over our heads and save for his college education. The next day, I rearranged my schedule, turning down an opportunity to chair a department committee, a position that would have looked impressive on my tenure application. Instead, I started hosting study sessions at our apartment every Thursday. I baked cookies I couldn't afford and watched Michael slowly begin to connect with his classmates. When Michael graduated high school, he was accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship. The rest I covered from my savings account, which held every extra dollar I had managed to set aside over a decade of careful budgeting. "You don't have to do this, Mom," he told me as we reviewed the tuition costs. "Yes, I do," I replied, signing the check. "This is what matters." The irony wasn't lost on me as I stared at the shadows on the guest room ceiling. Rebecca called me selfish, yet every major career decision I'd made was centered around Michael's needs. I had postponed my own dreams, worked extra hours, and stretched every dollar, not for myself, but for him. When Michael met Rebecca in his senior year of college, I was happy for him. She was pretty and confident, pursuing a degree in communications. I still remember our first meeting at a cafe near campus. She smiled politely as Michael told her about my position at the university. "A professor? How interesting," she said, but her eyes glazed over as Michael detailed my recent publication. As their relationship progressed, I noticed subtle changes in Michael. He called less frequently. When we did speak, he seemed guarded, as if measuring his words. After they married, the distance grew. Rebecca always had an excuse for why they couldn't visit. They were renovating, the kids were sick, the timing wasn't good. I tried to bridge the gap. I sent gifts for the children, called on their birthdays, offered to help when I heard Michael was between jobs. When Emma was born, I took a semester's leave to help with the newborn. Rebecca seemed grateful initially, but within weeks, tension filled the house. "I think I should handle it my way," she would say whenever I suggested a different approach to soothing Emma's colic. I backed away, not wanting to overstep. But distance once created is hard to bridge. The memory that stung most came flooding back as I lay in that guest bed. Emma's 4th birthday. I had asked Michael repeatedly what she might like. "She loves dinosaurs right now," he had said. I spent weeks searching for the perfect gift, a detailed book about dinosaurs with pop-up illustrations and scientific facts presented for young minds. When Emma opened it at her party, her eyes lit up. "Look, Mommy, dinosaurs!" she exclaimed. Rebecca smiled tightly. "How educational. Maybe we can read it when you're older." The book disappeared. Months later, when I asked Emma about it, she looked confused. "What dinosaur book, Grandma?" As dawn broke, I sat up in bed, a resolution forming in my mind. The album downstairs wasn't just an insult. It was the culmination of years of systematic erasure. Rebecca hadn't just cut me out of photos. She'd been cutting me out of my grandchildren's lives all along. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Janet, it's Eleanor. I need your help with something important. It's about my grandchildren. My oldest friend, a retired investigator for the district attorney's office, would know exactly what to do." The morning brought with it a steely resolve. I dressed carefully in a navy blue blouse and slacks, applied just enough makeup to look polished, and headed downstairs for breakfast. The house was quiet. Michael had already left for work, and Rebecca was upstairs getting the children ready for school. I poured myself a cup of coffee and noticed a stack of mail on the counter. An envelope with a childish drawing caught my attention. It was addressed to Grandma Eleanor in Emma's distinctive handwriting, but the envelope had been opened. Inside was a handmade card with dinosaurs clumsily drawn around the border. "I miss you, Grandma. When will you visit again?" My throat tightened. "Oh, that came yesterday," Rebecca said, entering the kitchen. "I meant to tell you." I carefully replaced the card in its envelope. "The postmark is from 3 weeks ago." Rebecca busied herself with the coffee maker. "Must have gotten lost in the shuffle." "You know how it is with kids' mail." Before I could respond, Emma and Liam bounded into the kitchen, backpacks ready. "Grandma, you're still here!" Liam exclaimed. "I'm leaving after breakfast, sweetheart," I said, smiling at his enthusiasm. "But I would love to come to your school first. Is that allowed?" Rebecca stiffened. "We're running late today, and visitors need to be approved in advance." "Actually," I said calmly, "I called the school this morning. As a grandparent on the approved family list, I can visit any time. Michael put me on that list years ago." Rebecca's lips formed a tight line. "Fine, but we need to leave in 10 minutes. The drive to school was tense, with Rebecca gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The children, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, chatted happily about their classes. At the school, Rebecca hurried the children inside, but not before I managed to give them both tight hugs. "I'll see you soon," I promised, my eyes meeting. Rebecca's in silent challenge. Instead of following them inside, I turned toward the administrative offices. "I'm Eleanor Campbell, Emma and Liam Bennett's grandmother," I told the receptionist. "I'd like to speak with their teachers if possible." 20 minutes later, I sat across from Mrs. Peterson, Emma's 4th-grade teacher, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Emma is a wonderful student," she said. "Creative, thoughtful. She mentions you quite often." "She does?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Mrs. Peterson nodded. "She brought in a book about influential women in history for show and tell last month. She said her grandmother gave it to her and that you're a professor who teaches students about important books." I blinked rapidly, fighting sudden tears. I had sent that book 6 months ago. "I didn't know she received it." Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted subtly. "Mrs. Bennett, there's something you should know. Emma often says she misses you. She told me once that her mother told her you're too busy to visit." "That's not true," I said quietly. "I've tried to visit many times." After similar revelations from Liam's teacher about my supposedly frequent cancellations of plans to see him, I left the school with a heavy heart but strengthened purpose. My next stop was a small cafe 3 blocks from Michael's office. Janet was already waiting, her silver hair cut in a practical bob, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed documents. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks for the honesty," I replied, sliding into the booth. Janet pushed a folder toward me. "I made some calls after you phoned this morning. Your daughter-in-law has been busy." Inside were printouts of social media posts. Rebecca's account set to private but accessed through mutual friends willing to help. There I was, painted as the disconnected grandmother, too wrapped up in her career to care about family. Posts lamenting how the children were disappointed when Grandma canceled again, on dates when I had never been invited in the first place. "There's more," Janet said, her voice gentle. "I spoke with your neighbor, Mrs. Winters." "The one who watches my house when I'm away?" Janet nodded. "She said packages you've sent to the children have been returned to your doorstep while you were at conferences. She kept them for you." A cold realization washed over me. The birthday gifts the children never acknowledged, the Christmas presents, met with polite but unenthusiastic thank you calls. They had never received them. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would Rebecca do this?" Janet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Some people can't stand to share affection, Eleanor. They need to be the center of their children's world, even if it means cutting out others who love them." I thought of the opened card. On the kitchen counter, of Emma proudly showing her class the book I'd sent, of all the missed opportunities for connection. The pain was sharp, but clarity was emerging through the hurt. "What are you going to do?" Janet asked. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to get my grandchildren back." On the drive to my apartment, I made 2 more calls. The first was to my attorney, requesting copies of all financial assistance I had provided to Michael and Rebecca over the years. The down payment for their house, the loan when Michael lost his job 3 years ago, the monthly deposits into the children's college funds. The second call was to Michael himself. "Mom, is everything okay? You left without saying goodbye." "I thought it best," I said carefully. "Michael, we need to talk. Not over the phone. Dinner, just the 2 of us, next Friday." "I don't know if—" "This isn't a request, Michael. This is important." A pause. "Rebecca won't like it." "This isn't about Rebecca. This is about you and me, and the truth." After he reluctantly agreed, I hung up and parked outside my building. Mrs. Winters was watering plants on her balcony and waved when she saw me. "Eleanor, I kept those packages in my spare room. Would you like me to bring them down?" An hour later, I sat surrounded by unopened gifts, books, educational games, handcrafted items from my travels, all returned while I was away. Each one had been carefully selected for Emma or Liam. Each one represented love that had been intercepted. Picked up a small music box I had bought for Emma's last birthday. It played Beethoven's Für Elise and contained a handwritten note about how my father had played this piece on the piano when I was a child. The lid was slightly warped from being forced open and then closed again. Someone had inspected it before sending it back. That night, I began assembling what would go into the envelope. It would need to be irrefutable. It would need to be honest. Most importantly, it would need to finally break through the walls Rebecca had built around my grandchildren. Over the next 2 weeks, I immersed myself in gathering evidence. Each discovery was another weight on my heart, another confirmation of Rebecca's systematic campaign to erase me from my grandchildren's lives. The Friday dinner with Michael nearly didn't happen. He called twice to reschedule, each excuse more transparent than the last. Only when I told him I was considering selling my house, the childhood home he'd grown up in, did he finally agree to meet. We sat across from each other at Antonio's, the Italian restaurant where we used to celebrate his academic achievements. Michael looked tired, the circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. "You're not really selling the house, are you?" he asked after we ordered. "That depends on this conversation," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Michael, I need to know why you've allowed Rebecca to cut me out of your children's lives." He stared at his water glass. "You're exaggerating, Mom. Rebecca just feels that the kids need consistent routines." "Is that why she's been telling them I cancel visits I never knew about? Or why she returns gifts I send them?" His head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" I placed a folder on the table and slid it toward him. "Your wife has been lying to you, or you've been lying to yourself. Either way, your children are being denied a relationship with their grandmother." Michael opened the folder reluctantly. Inside were photocopies of returned packages, screenshots of Rebecca's social media posts, and statements from Emma and Liam's teachers about comments the children had made regarding their absent grandmother. "This could be misinterpreted," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "There's more," I said, pulling out printed bank statements. "The down payment for your house, the loan when you were between jobs, the monthly deposits into the children's college funds." I paused. "I've never mentioned these because I didn't want you to feel obligated. But it seems relevant now that I'm being portrayed as an uncaring grandmother who puts her career before family." Michael's face crumpled. "Mom, Why, Michael? Why have you allowed this?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his childhood that my anger momentarily faltered. "Rebecca had a difficult childhood," he began. "Her mother was harsh, critical. When her parents divorced, her father remarried quickly, and his new wife wanted nothing to do with Rebecca. She was shuttled between relatives who saw her as a burden." "So she's punishing me for the sins of her own family?" "No," Michael sighed. It's more complicated. She's terrified of the children being hurt the way she was. She sees your career as evidence that you could abandon them emotionally, just as her family abandoned her. I leaned forward. Michael, look at me. Have I ever given you reason to believe I would abandon Emma and Liam? He couldn't hold my gaze. No, but Rebecca is convinced that your work will always come first. When you missed Liam's kindergarten play, I was in the hospital with pneumonia, I interrupted. I sent a video message that apparently was never shown to him. Michael's shoulders sagged. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, because you've chosen not to see it. The waiter arrived with our food, but neither of us touched it. What do you want from me? Michael finally asked. I want you to be honest with yourself about what's happening. I want you to stop enabling Rebecca's behavior. Most of all, I want a relationship with my grandchildren without interference. Michael pushed his plate away. She won't agree to that. Then she leaves me no choice but to take matters into my own hands. His eyes widened. What does that mean? I didn't answer directly. Do you remember when you were 10 and the Petersons' dog bit you? You begged me not to report it, because you were afraid the dog would be put down. He nodded slowly. I respected your wishes, even though every maternal instinct told me to protect you from future harm. But then the dog bit another child, more severely. I've regretted that decision ever since. I reached for my purse. I won't make the same mistake with Emma and Liam. The emotional harm being done to them stops now. As I stood to leave, Michael caught my wrist. Mom, please, let me talk to Rebecca first. You've had 11 years to talk to her, Michael. The time for talking is over. The following week was spent organizing my evidence and preparing what I now thought of as the envelope. Janet helped, bringing her investigator's eye to the arrangement of materials for maximum impact. Are you sure about this? She asked as we finalized everything. Once you do this, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said, sealing the large manila envelope. It's not just about me anymore. It's about Emma and Liam, and the damage being done to them by this toxic situation. I received a text from Michael that evening. Rebecca agreed to family counseling. Too little, too late. The decision had been made. The next morning, I called Rebecca directly, something I rarely did. Eleanor? Her surprise was evident. Michael isn't home, right? I'm not calling for Michael. I'm calling to let you know I'll be attending Liam's science fair tomorrow. A pause. We didn't think you'd be interested. I'm always interested in my grandchildren's achievements. I'll see you. There at 4 p.m. Before she could formulate another excuse, I hung up. That night, I carefully packed the envelope in my briefcase alongside a smaller package wrapped in silver paper. Years of academic presentations had taught me the importance of timing, of creating the right moment for a revelation to have its greatest impact. Tomorrow would be that moment, not just because of the science fair, but because I had learned from Emma's social media page, created and monitored by Rebecca, of course, that they were hosting a family dinner afterward to celebrate Liam's project and Rebecca's parents' anniversary. The perfect audience, the perfect occasion, the perfect reckoning. As I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking of Emma and Liam, of all the moments I had missed, and all the future moments that hung in the balance. This wasn't just about my relationship with them. It was about their right to know the truth, to form their own opinions, to have all the people who loved them present in their lives. Tomorrow, everything would change. The envelope was ready. The elementary school gymnasium buzzed with excitement. Colorful posters and handmade science projects lined the walls and tables, proud children standing beside their creations. I arrived early, pausing at the entrance to scan the room for Liam's project. I spotted him in the corner, nervously adjusting a volcano model. Next to him stood Rebecca, immaculately dressed in a cream blouse and pencil skirt, looking more like she was attending a business meeting than a school event. Michael was nowhere to be seen. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward them, my briefcase firm in my grip. Liam saw me first, his face lighting up. "Grandma, you really came!" He rushed forward, throwing his arms around my waist. "Of course I did, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world." I hugged him tightly, savoring the moment. Rebecca's smile was stiff. "Eleanor, this is a surprise." "Is it? I told you I was coming!" I turned back to Liam. "Now, tell me all about this volcano." For the next 15 minutes, I listened attentively as Liam explained his project, how he'd constructed the volcano using paper mache, the chemical reaction that would make it erupt, and the research he'd done on real volcanic activity. His enthusiasm was infectious, his knowledge impressive for an 8-year-old. "You've done a wonderful job," I said when he finished. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Grandma." He beamed. "Dad helped a little with the painting, but I did all the science. Parts myself." "Speaking of your father," Rebecca interjected, "he just texted. He's running late, but should be here soon." Liam's smile dimmed slightly. He promised he wouldn't miss it. "Meetings run long sometimes, honey. You know how important Dad's job is." I caught the hypocrisy immediately. The same excuse Rebecca had attributed to me countless times was apparently acceptable when it applied to Michael. "Well, I'm here," I said, squeezing Liam's shoulder. "And I brought something for you." I reached into my briefcase and handed him the silver-wrapped package. Rebecca stiffened. "We don't do gifts at school events." "It's relevant to his project," I replied calmly. Liam had already torn open the wrapping to reveal a book. Volcanoes of the World, an illustrated guide. "Wow!" he exclaimed, flipping through the pages with their dramatic photographs and detailed diagrams. "This is so cool. I thought it might help with your next science project," I said. "There's an inscription inside." Liam turned to the front page where I'd written, "To my brilliant grandson Liam, whose curiosity and intelligence will take him to great heights. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor." "Thank you," he said quietly, tracing the words with his finger. Rebecca reached for the book. "Let me put that in my bag so it doesn't get damaged." "Actually," I said, "I think Liam might want to show it to the judges. It demonstrates his interest in the subject beyond just this project." Before Rebecca could argue, the principal announced that judging would begin in 5 minutes. Liam hurried back to his volcano, book clutched proudly against his chest. Rebecca turned to me, her voice low. "What are you doing, Eleanor?" "Being a grandmother," I replied simply. Michael arrived just as the judges reached Liam's table. I watched from a distance as my grandson confidently explained his project, occasionally referencing the book to show the judges real-world examples of volcanic phenomena. The pride on Michael's face was unmistakable, though he shot me a questioning look when he noticed the book. After the judging, Liam received an honorable mention. Not first place, but enough to make him glow with satisfaction. As families began to leave, Rebecca reminded everyone about the dinner at their house. "Eleanor, you're welcome to join us," she said, the reluctance evident in her tone. "My parents are coming and we're celebrating their anniversary as well as Liam's achievement." "How thoughtful of you to include me," I replied, knowing the invitation was only extended because we were in public. The drive to their house was silent. I followed in my own car, the briefcase containing the envelope on the passenger seat beside me. With each mile, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about restoring what had been stolen from me and, more importantly, from Emma and Liam. Rebecca's parents, Donald and Marilyn, were already at the house when we arrived. They were pleasant enough people, though I had met them only a handful of times over the years. Emma was helping to set the table, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Grandma, did you see Liam's volcano?" "I did, sweetheart. It was very impressive." Dinner was a stilted affair. Rebecca dominated the conversation, highlighting her parents. 40 years of marriage and making pointed remarks about traditional family values and being present for important moments. Michael contributed little, his gaze often dropping to his plate whenever Rebecca spoke. Donald raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said. "The most important thing in life." "To family," everyone echoed. As dessert was served, a cake, decorated with "Congratulations, Liam" and "Happy Anniversary," Rebecca began distributing gifts to her parents. The moment had arrived. "Before we continue," I said, my voice steady, "I have something I'd like to share." All eyes turned to me. Rebecca's smile froze. "What is it, Eleanor?" Marilyn asked. I placed the manila envelope on the table. "This is for Rebecca." Rebecca stared at it suspiciously. "What is this?" "Open it," I suggested. "I think you'll find it enlightening." With reluctant fingers, she untied the string and opened the flap. Inside were neatly organized folders, each labeled clearly: returned gifts, intercepted communications, financial support, false claims, and teachers' statements. Rebecca's face paled as she flipped through the first folder, seeing photographs of the returned packages along with receipts and shipping confirmations. "What is all this?" Donald asked, peering over his daughter's shoulder. "Evidence," I said. Simply, evidence of a systematic campaign to erase me from my grandchildren's lives. Michael reached for the second folder, his expression darkening as he read through the copies of emails and text messages I had sent him over the years, asking about visiting the children, messages he claimed never to have received. "Mom, I don't understand." "Don't you?" I interrupted. "For years, Rebecca has intercepted gifts, hidden messages, canceled visits I never knew about, and painted me as an absent grandmother who cares more about her career than her family." Rebecca pushed the envelope away. "This is ridiculous. You're trying to cause trouble." "No, Rebecca. I'm simply presenting facts." I turned to Emma and Liam, who were watching with confused expressions. "Did either of you receive the birthday presents I sent last year? Or the Christmas gifts? Or the books and games I've been sending for years?" Emma's brow furrowed. "You sent presents?" "Many," I confirmed. "And letters and invitations to visit me, none of which you received, apparently." Rebecca stood abruptly. "Children, go to your rooms. This is adult conversation." "No," I said firmly. "They deserve to hear this. They've been lied to about me for years." The tension in the room was palpable. Donald and Marilyn exchanged uncomfortable glances. Michael looked shell-shocked, staring at the evidence spread before him. Rebecca's voice was ice. "How dare you come into my home and make these accusations in front of my children and parents?" I met her gaze steadily. "How dare you steal my relationship with my grandchildren and then label me as the worst grandma in the world?" The gasp from Marilyn confirmed she understood the reference to the family album. Emma's eyes widened in recognition as well. "Is that what this is about? That's stupid." "Album," Rebecca scoffed, but her voice trembled slightly. "No," I replied calmly. "This is about the truth. And it's time everyone heard it." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft sound of Emma's chair scraping back as she stood to look more closely at the evidence that had altered the course of our family forever. The silence in the dining room stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Emma stood beside me, her fingers gently touching the photographs of unopened gifts that had been returned. Liam had edged closer to his father, confusion written across his young face. Rebecca remained standing, her knuckles white as she gripped the back of her chair. "This is absurd," she finally said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "You're manipulating the situation to make me look bad." "The evidence speaks for itself," I replied calmly. Michael picked up a sheet from the financial support folder, a copy of the check I'd written for their house down payment. "Mom, I never knew it was this much." he said quietly. Rebecca's father cleared his throat. Rebecca, what is all this? It's nothing, Dad. Eleanor is just bitter because she doesn't fit into our family the way she wants to. Is that why you told me Grandma canceled our trip to the museum last summer? Emma asked suddenly. She didn't really cancel, did she? Rebecca's face flushed. Emma, you don't understand. I understand that you lied, Emma interrupted, a flash of hurt crossing her face. I cried all day because I thought Grandma didn't want to see me. That revelation cut me to the core. I reached for Emma's hand, but she was already moving away, back toward her seat, her eyes downcast. Michael stood up, gathering the scattered papers from the envelope. We need to discuss this privately, Rebecca. There's nothing to discuss, she snapped. Eleanor comes into our home once or twice a year and thinks she knows everything about our family. She has no right to question how I raise my children. They're my children too, Michael said, his voice firmer than I'd heard in years. Marilyn moved to Rebecca's side. Darling, perhaps we should go. This seems like a family matter that needs to be resolved. You are family, Rebecca insisted. Eleanor is the outsider here. No, Michael countered, surprising everyone. My mother is family. She always has been. Rebecca's hands began to shake. You're taking her side? After everything I've done for this family? This isn't about sides, Rebecca. It's about the truth. Did you hide my mother's gifts from the children? Did you lie about canceled visits? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Liam tugged at his father's sleeve. Dad, is Grandma's book going to disappear like the dinosaur one did? Michael looked down at his son, confusion giving way to understanding. What dinosaur book, buddy? The one Grandma gave me last year. I read it once, and then I couldn't find it anymore. Mom said I probably lost it. Michael turned to Rebecca, awaiting an explanation. The book was inappropriate, she said defensively. It was too advanced for him. That wasn't your decision to make, Michael replied. And it certainly wasn't right to tell him he lost it. Donald stepped forward. Rebecca, we raised you better than this, if what we're seeing here is true. Of course you'd all gang up on me, Rebecca cried. None of you understand what it's like to compete with St. Eleanor, the perfect career woman who gets to swoop in with fancy gifts and then leave when things get hard. The raw emotion in her voice gave me pause. Behind the manipulation and lies was a deeply insecure woman who saw me as a threat rather than a potential ally. I've never tried to compete with you, Rebecca, I said softly. All I've ever wanted was to be part of my grandchildren's lives. Part of their lives? She scoffed. You missed school plays and birthdays because of your precious career. You weren't there when Emma had chickenpox or when Liam broke his arm. Because I wasn't told, I responded. Or because I was deliberately given the wrong dates. The evidence is right there in black and white. Michael stepped between us. This needs to stop. All of it. He turned to his in-laws. Donald, Marilyn, I apologize, but I think we need to postpone the celebration. They nodded, understanding, in their eyes as they gathered their coats. Donald paused beside Rebecca. We'll talk about this tomorrow, he said, his disappointment evident. After they left, Michael turned to the children. Emma, Liam, please go upstairs for a little while. Your mother, grandmother, and I need to talk. Once they were gone, Michael sank into a chair. I don't even know where to begin. You can start by asking your wife why she created that family album with me cut out of every picture, I suggested. Rebecca crossed her arms. The album was meant to be private. Yet you left it on the coffee table where I would see it, I pointed. Out. Michael ran a hand through his hair. Why, Rebecca? Why would you do all this? For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then her composure cracked. Because she doesn't deserve them, Rebecca burst out. She spent years putting her career first, and now she gets to play the doting grandmother without any of the real work. My mother was never there for me. My stepmother rejected me. And now, Eleanor swoops in with her professor status and world travels, making me look like the boring, ordinary mother who never did anything important. The pain in her voice was real, and for the first time, I saw beyond my own hurt to hers. "Rebecca," I said gently, "being a mother is the most important job in the world. I know that because I was one. I worked hard not despite loving Michael, but because I loved him. I wanted to give him opportunities I never had." She refused to meet my eyes. "And now," I continued, "I want to be a grandmother to Emma and Liam. Not to compete with you, but to complement you. To love them in my own way, which includes sharing my experiences and, yes, sometimes giving gifts that reflect my interests and theirs." Michael reached for Rebecca's hand. "This can't continue. The lying, the manipulation, it's hurting everyone, especially the children." Rebecca pulled away. "So what happens now? Eleanor gets everything she wants, and I'm the villain?" "What I want," I said firmly, "is a relationship with my grandchildren based on honesty. That's all I've ever wanted." Michael stood up. "We need professional help to work through this. Family counseling like I suggested before." Rebecca's laugh was bitter. "Of course. Fix the broken wife." "No," Michael replied. "Heal the broken family." I gathered the contents of the envelope, returning them to their folders. "I didn't come here seeking revenge, Rebecca. I came seeking truth. Now that it's out, we have choices to make about how to move forward." The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Emma and Liam's return. They stood in the doorway, uncertainty on their faces. "Is Grandma leaving?" Emma asked. I looked. At Michael, then Rebecca. This was their home. Their decision. Rebecca wiped at her eyes, then straightened her shoulders. "No," she said quietly. "Grandma's staying for dessert. We still have an anniversary and a science fair to celebrate. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even acceptance, but it was a start." 6 months later, I sat in the garden of my home, watching Emma and Liam chase butterflies among the rose bushes. They were spending the weekend with me, alone, for the first time. The family therapy sessions had been difficult, but necessary, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding on all sides. Rebecca and I had reached a tentative truce. She was learning to see me not as a competitor, but as a different kind of maternal figure. I was learning to understand her insecurities and fears. Michael had found his voice again, no longer caught helplessly between wife and mother. Most importantly, Emma and Liam now had unfiltered access to their grandmother. The dinosaur book had reappeared, along with other lost gifts. Letters were delivered, phone calls connected, and visits happened as planned. The family album had been redone, with a twist. Instead of cutting me out, Rebecca had added a new section titled Grandma Eleanor's Adventures, filled with photos of my teaching career and travels, interspersed with new pictures of me with the children. It wasn't perfect. Healing rarely is. But as I watched my grandchildren play in the late afternoon sun, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The painful album that had started it all now sat on my bookshelf. A reminder not of exclusion, but of the power of truth, to restore what had been lost. The envelope that had changed everything remained in my desk drawer, hopefully never to be needed again. Some might call it forgiveness. I preferred to think of it as restoration, of dignity, of relationships, of family bonds too precious to lose. The inscription I had written in Liam's volcano book now seemed prophetic. Knowledge and truth, like lava, always find a way to the cool surface. And when they do, they change the landscape forever.